This week's Parsha, we learn about the infamous individual called Korach. Korach was the first cousin of Moshe, who initially started off on a righteous path in life and eventually led a rebellion against Moshe, and it was a very tragic result, with Korach leading many people and inciting them against Moshe, and ultimately led to Korach's downfall, where the ground opened up and swallowed Korach and all of his followers in the desert. But how was a gentleman like Korach, who started off so scholarly, so bright and talented, how did such an individual get so miscarried to eventually leading a rebellion and inciting folks against a leader none other than Moses in the desert? You know, if we take a look at the story in the desert prior to the rebellion of Korach, there were a series of setbacks that took place. Of course, there was a story of the golden calf, then there was a story of the spies, and then there was the stories of the complainers, and all of these stories of the Jewish people having a series of errors and setbacks where there were consequences. And it was a very stressful period of time for the population back then. You know, people were told that they're not going to enter the land of Israel. People are told that they're going to be spending much time in the desert. It was a very stressful time. And in a very stressful time, many times, them, as we do in life, they looked for somebody to blame for their situation. Because as in our life, when we experience stress, many times our initial reaction and instinct is, who can we blame? And that is not a healthy attitude. A more healthy approach is, in times of stress, let us seek solutions rather than try to pin the blame on others. Korach was an individual who said, who can we blame for the mishaps and all the setbacks that we have in the desert? And he pointed his finger towards Moshe and incited the people against Moshe. He manipulated the stress of the people at that time. Ultimately, that led to the downfall of Korach. Folks, I think that's a powerful lesson for us in our lives, because everybody, without an exception, has a certain stress level. And many times, we immediately want to point to a certain individual or circumstance and say, it's their fault or it's his fault why it's happening. Let us remember the lesson of Korach. Let us remember how devastating the consequences are when we try to blame somebody in a stressful situation as opposed to seeking a solution. I think it's a wonderful lesson to emulate from this week's Parsha. Have a wonderful Shabbos.